as important as Chaucer is in terms of its historical um, significance within the history of literature and art, you can't lose sight of just the style, the mastery of it as he unfolds these many tales. You can get kind of lost in the stories themselves, the narrative value of it, and of the frame tale and the history of frame tales, but just uh, the sheer expertise, the sheer skill and joy that comes through the style of the way he writes is at least as important. After laying out in the general prologue, after laying out all the different characters, he starts in now, declarative, simple. And again, this is a translation, this is a modernizing, but the Middle English actually isn't that far off. It's foreign in a sense, but it's recognizable. You can pick your way through it as a modern English speaker, and it's manageable. And a lot of the punctuation rhythms of it actually hold true if the individual vocabulary words do not. Now, I have told you truly, in a clause, the rank, the dress, the number, and the cause, and the cause that brought together all this company in Southwark at this noble hostelry that's called the Tabard, next door to the Bell. Just look at the way that sentence unfolds. Now, after this kind of long section of laying out this character and then this character and then this character, a lot of these long disquisitions on each individual character, he needs to signal that, okay, now we're moving on. Now something else is happening. So just look at that short syncopated thing, the rank, the dress, the number, and the cause. And the way that cause rhymes with in a clause. The simple boom, 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 waking the reader up, shaking him and saying, okay, now we're doing something different. That's done, now we're moving on. And the way the enjambment of that brought together all this company in Southwark at this noble hostelry, that's called the Tabard. The rhymes link from line to line, but the sentences stretch on so that you're drawn on through this poem, and you're not just simply sitting there reading couplets. It's very hard to find a spot where you can just stick a bookmark in there and say, okay, that's enough for me for tonight, because you're always sort of dragged on into the next line. It's as if he just can't control himself. The sentences themselves seem to be just so full of life that they keep you moving on, and that is very deliberate. In that, you also get the rhythm. It's an early forerunner of iambic pentameter. It's a decasyllabic line, I believe. That gives you this steady dog trot type feel, which almost feels like, honestly, riding on horseback. Clump, 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 clump. It's very steady. You're moving on, and it's fun. It's sort of a rollicking good time, and you can get drawn in just by that. It is fun to read. It's fun to read out loud. It's fun to hear, and it's just fun to hear it like echo around in your head, because it's sort of a lilting little song, and it makes it joyful, the experience. But afterward I will tell of our voyage and all the rest about our pilgrimage. But first I pray you, by your courtesy, that you not blame my own vulgarity, although I might speak plainly in this matter when I tell you their words and their demeanor, or if I speak their words exact and true. And this again is significant because he's talking about vulgarity in a couple of senses here. Number one, some of the stories will get a little crude. Some of the stories, as we have seen already in the prologue, hint at some lascivious behavior. And he's sort of playing on that with vulgarity, but vulgarity has the other sense also in terms of a vulgar tongue. English was at the time a vulgar tongue, a polite a polite language to write in is Latin, of course. That is the elevated, that is the high language of scholars and intellectuals, and that's what great art is supposed to be in. But at this point in history, the vulgar tongues, so to speak, the vernaculars are coming about. And he is announcing here that English is among that. Um, France was doing it in Roman de la Rose and a number of those works. Italy was certainly doing it. Dante, very famously, Boccaccio, Petrarch, less so. He was a big Latin proponent. But the move towards a more accessible language was definitely afoot in these early days of the Renaissance. And the sense that Latin as a cloistered language, as a dead language, was ill suited to the times, because in order to get the full range of humanity into your poem, you needed to leave aside everything that was restricted, everything that was limited to those cloistered elites who had the money and the skill and the time to learn Latin, and very few people did outside the church, quite honestly. So he is writing from a kind of uh, impulse to bring everyone in, the readers, the characters, everybody into this raucous gathering on the way to Canterbury. He couches it in terms of the characters significantly also, because you're going to be seeing a lot of characters, as we have seen throughout the general prologue, who are not necessarily the types that normally get written about. The knight, certainly. You get a lot of, he's working on a long tradition of knightly literature, courtly literature. So that was expected. But when he talks about, when I tell you their words and their demeanor, he's talking about the cruder people, the people who are less commonly referenced in literature. A lot of the artisans, a lot of the laborers, a lot of the common people that don't normally get a voice, literally, in literature. So he's saying, on the one hand, well, don't blame me if they're a little crude, so I am just doing it, or I am just reporting what they are saying. That's on them. But of course, he is making it up. He's not reporting anything. He is conjuring all of this on his own. So he's he's hinting at you to you that you should be aware of this. So the style is intricately interwoven with the substance of the stories and the substance of the poem itself. The style is part of the value that he is bringing to this whole enterprise. And he's very explicit about this in both the high and low sense when he lays out the plan of the host. Somebody who is leading these people on this expedition says that, okay, we're going to come up with this story to pass the time. We're going to come up with these stories to pass the time. It introduces the frame of the frame tales. He says, two tales along this journey, two tales you will say towards Canterbury, as I mean you to, and homeward you'll tell us another two, of adventures that in old times did befall, the one who bears himself best of all, that is to say, the one of you who might tell tales that have most meaning and delight. And here, most meaning and delight. He's leaning on an old construction of the Roman poet Horace, who said that literature is meant to delight and to instruct, or is it instruct and delight? I don't really know, but it should have some material value, some educative value. It should make you a better person in some sense for the experience of reading, but it should also simply entertain you. It should delight. And that notion of delight was what was coming in, and here we're getting more into the historical reference of it, was coming in the Renaissance, because if human life and human identity has value, then human entertainment and human joy has value. And they should be, literature does not only have to be about saving your soul, or it shouldn't only have to be about making you a better Christian, or uh, any of the other things that so much medieval literature was buried in. All this trying to make you better, or scare you into behaving certain ways. It's saying that, well, no, we're okay now, and we deserve some recognition as that. And so, to delight and instruct, most meaning and delight shall have supper paid for us by us all. So again, the reward for this is of people coming together. If you win and you tell the best story, we're going to buy you dinner, but we're all going to eat it together. And that wonderful, wonderful sense communicated through the substance and the style of the poem of human togetherness and the joy in simply experiencing life in its fullness together, whether that is through bringing everybody in and entertaining them with funny little stories, some of them very high and cultured, some of them very low and coarse, and usually those are the funny ones, or if it's through just the simple, happy rhythms of the style of the poetry and the little details that he picks out that everyone can recognize, not just the super educated. Those little details that he gives of all the characters and the way they dress that suggest to us that, okay, he's really giving a sense of the character. He is bringing everybody who can recognize those things, everybody, into it. They may not get the literary histories, the literary allusions, the historical references, or any of the high cultural attributes that he's burying in there in the context, but they can experience the little moments, those little joys, those little details that everyone can recognize and feel a part of it, that brings them into the experience of the poetry. And that's what he does with this style. That's what he does with the simple joy of words. And that's what makes the Canterbury Tales as a whole quite extraordinary. And he hints at it so clearly right in the beginning with the general prologue to say, this is what I am doing. And come on along, you're going to enjoy yourself. And it's a very good chance you will.